How are we preparing the next generation? This is a question I'd like to talk about. As well, share with you a story from a dark period of my life, which led to this insight and aha moment I had around this whole notion of preparing the next generation to enter the workforce. As well, I want to share with you how TED Talks saved me. Some of my favorite TED Talks and TED speakers have spoken around this notion of working with different generations. And as an executive coach working with senior leaders across North America, it was really relevant in the work that I was doing. Because what was top of mind for these senior leaders was how do we work with and engage, excuse me for saying this, the M-word generation. Now, this was work I loved because as an executive coach working with these leaders, I got to be in the boardroom in billion, not million, but billion-dollar deals. Even got to meet Warren Buffett. So I thought I was pretty successful. I was flying all over North America, traveling in first class, staying at some of the finest hotels. In 1 week, I'd be in Houston, then Chicago and Montreal, and the following week, Vancouver, down to LA and Seattle, and even enjoying some of the finest steak dinners that cost more than my first dinner. Although Scotch, to this day, I still don't appreciate it the way I was told I should have. But as I was staying at all these fancy hotels, one of the things that hit me was that I was wetting the bed. No, not in that sense. But every night, from the head down to the knees, the bed would be soaked from night sweats. I didn't think too much of it, so I went to a walk-in clinic, and they didn't think too much of it, but they ordered some tests, and then a few more tests. Then I got called in to see a doctor. Now, she had that look on her face. I honestly thought she called me Luke, and something about musical therapy. But what she told me is I had leukemia, for which there was no known curative therapy. So bottom line, I have incurable cancer. Well, what do you do with that, told that you have incurable cancer? I didn't know what the now what was. I actually went back to work that day. Didn't tell anyone for days. And on the walk home, crossing this intersection, I had a good cry. Because what is the now what of incurable cancer? I didn't know. And I went to some very dark places in that moment. And I started just binge watching TV because I really didn't know what else to do. And I discovered the TED channel. And I started watching TED Talks more and more and more. And I would binge watch them. Some of them I'd watch over and over and over again, from Simon Sinek to Rob Finley's Urban Gardener to Bugs Save the World and so many more. And these ideas were spreading, for me anyway, helped me reframe my own situation in terms of where I was at. Now, anyone who does have cancer or knows someone who does, you know that we have to go through what seems like a full day, and multiple of these days, at the hospital. Everything from going from blood work to chest x-rays to getting full physicals, as well as getting an MRI. Now, if you've ever been on one of those MRI tables, it's one of the loneliest experiences ever. That hospital that I was at was a teaching hospital. And the senior oncologist asked me if I wouldn't mind if his clinical clerks could be with me through the day as I was going through all the different procedures and for them to be able to do physicals on me. So of course I said yes. Well, never again do I want to have 12 random strangers doing an examination of my testicles. That was a very difficult time. But as I was laying there while they were doing what they had to do, I was observing that senior doctor. That senior doctor was just asking them questions, Socratic-like questions. He didn't tell them what to do. No, instead, when he gave them feedback not on the result, but on their thought process. And this got me thinking, as he was asking these questions, that was exactly what I did as an executive coach with my clients. I never once gave my clients the answer. I would just ask them questions to help guide them, and they had to own the answer. But that's what he was doing with the med students. He never once gave them the answer. They had to own the answer through that process. He was just there to ask them questions. And that got me thinking, why do we have and reserve executive coaches just for executives? Why not bring executive coaching or that executive coaching mindset into schools. Now, I know some people are going to say this, but okay, we have support on campus. We have guidance counselors on campus. My argument will be this. Guidance counselors do what? They provide guidance, they provide direction. I'm not saying we replace that, but it's a very different mindset than executive coaching, where in the executive coaches, the individual gets to own that process. As an executive coach, one of the things that we do, and one of the mantras I had, is I never coached to the story or to the excuse. What I did coach to was the now what. And of course, I certainly would have a very good excuse, incurable cancer. But now I focus not on that, but I focus on the now what. Another thing that executive coaches do is we help our clients reframe or look at something different. And when you reframe it, yes, maybe you might feel a bit better about it, but more importantly, the actions, the behaviors that come out of that reframe, that's what's important. I'm going to share with you an example of what I mean. One of my students came to me in tears. And as I was asking questions, it turns out that the teacher had given him some feedback on some work. And he had internalized that as the teacher hated him. Would have been so easy for me to say, no, that's not the case. But I didn't do that. I mean, would he have listened to the bearded guy? So what I did is I asked him some more questions. And as I got asking the student some questions, after about 15 minutes, the student himself reframed it as feedback was good, especially for the career he was going into, and one day would make him hyper-competitive when he got out into the animation studio. Again, would we have gotten that same result if I just told him? Or if I had used executive coaching to guide him through to that answer that he got to own? I'll give you another example. Imagine you have two students in the exact same program. Let's say they're in a graphic design web development program. So these two students are going to be learning the exact same technical things in class. But success for them post-school will be very different. One student, on one hand, might want to be an entrepreneur one day. The other student might want to work at that big design firm in New York or Montreal. While working one-on-one with an executive coach, we could work with that entrepreneur, working towards how do you build out that entrepreneurial mindset? How do you network? But network from the perspective of getting new clients. With that student who wanted to work at that design firm, sure, we could work with networking, but the coaching would be how do you network to get a job at that design firm? How do you conduct informational interviews to better position yourself to be successful in that panel interview you'll have one day? So again, both students taking the exact same technical course, but working one-on-one with an executive coach to achieve success on however that student or that client decides success looks like. Now, I know I might not have answered fully this question of how are we preparing the next generation to enter the workforce, but at the very least, I hope we've started a conversation today. Thank you.